Parsha in the book of Leviticus this week, the very end of Leviticus, Parshat Behukotai, which is one, just as some of us know, it's one of the 7 Parshiot in the Torah that, depending on the given year, is doubled with another Parsha so that we can get through the annual cycle of reading within the year, right? 52 weeks in the year, but there are 54 Torah portions, plus when you add in holidays and special readings for that in order to get through the annual cycle. For Simchat Torah, some Parshiot in any given year get doubled. So often, Behukotai is paired with last week's Parsha, Bahar, and it's Bahar Behukotai. But this year, it's all by itself. So we get to really just focus on some of the beauty of Behukotai. And those who have kind of read ahead may know. It's a list of sort of blessings and curses, which began in last week's Parsha, in which God is basically saying to our ancestors, look, if you obey all the laws and do all the rules, and then you will prosper in the land, and the seasons will fall at the right time, and it will rain, and you'll have tons of crops, and you'll have my protection, and all will be good, and life will be amazing. You will be blessed. Then there's the other side of it, right? But on the other hand, if you don't follow the rules and you turn away from the Torah, from the mitzvot, then in essence, I will wreak havoc upon you. And the land will become hard and nothing will grow, and the rains will not fall at the right times. Your enemies will overthrow you, and I'll abandon you. Something to that effect. So we're gonna get into this idea today specifically. One piece of it, one of the someone once called it a threat. I think it's actually a consequence. One of the consequences that I at one point saw as a piece of this is the idea that if we don't follow these rules, then God is going to exile our ancestors from this promised land of Israel. And so we're going to kind of focus on that theme today, because, if you will, it happened, right? So we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper there in that. So I'm going to share my screen, and you'll forgive me, I have a little laryngitis going on here. So, okay, can everybody see here? So I'm going to move you guys so that, hang on. There we go. So I can see you and the text. Okay. So first we have this little piece from the Parsha from Leviticus. Anybody want to volunteer to read this little piece of Leviticus for us?
Do we say the blessing?
Oh, we should. We absolutely should. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher tzivanu v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I was so excited to get into the Parsha that I completely forgot. All right. Anybody want to read this little piece of Leviticus? Go ahead, David.
And I will make your cities a waste, and will bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. And I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies that dwell therein shall be astonished at it. And you will I scatter among the nations, and I will draw out the sword after you. And your land shall be a desolation, and your cities shall be a waste.
Cheerful, no? Great. Any thoughts there before we get into some of the commentaries and what the sages have to say about this? Any initial reactions? I'm going to scroll through here. Okay, no worries. We'll keep going. Okay. So little line from Siddur Ashkenaz, that because of our sins that we have been exiled from our land and sent far from our soil, right? And this comes in a post exile time period after the destruction of the Second Temple, right? This notion that it in essence it was our fault, it was our ancestors' fault that exile ultimately came to happen, sort of as it was foretold in the Parsha. And then one further here, right, which I think is interesting. Ibn Ezra, on the first verse here, says, "I will spurn you." The Shekhinah, one of the names for God, right, will turn aside, and thus your cities will be made desolate. Once the Shekhinah turns from you, they are your sanctuaries, not mine. Which I think is interesting, right? The idea that when God leaves, God's presence is no longer there, right? That makes the city desolate. And that once the city is desolate, God's presence is not there, then, there can be a sanctuary, there can be a temple, whatever, but it has no relationship to God or to Judaism.
Shalom, Rabbi.
Hi, Mary, how are you?
Sad about Texas and can cry.
Any thoughts on Hey, Mary, any thoughts on this text? All right. We'll go a little bit further than I think. Hopefully we'll have something to chat about. So now another take on this, right? Rashi says, "And your land will be..." Actually, somebody else want to read this?
Where is it?
Right here, Rashi.
Rashi. I can read it.
Thanks, Risa.
This implies that you will not soon return unto it, and on that account your cities will be waste. That is, they will seem to you waste. For when a man is exiled from his house or from his vineyard or from his city, knowing that he is ultimately to return to it, it appears to him as though his vineyard or his house were not waste. Thus it is explained in Torah Kohanim. The repeated phrases, if after all this, if despite this...
We'll stop there. We'll stop there, Risa.
Okay.
That's another text, right? But this notion that this implies the idea that there's not going to be return, right? There will not soon be return, right? Because if you think you're going to return, then it's just an absence, right? But it's not being left to waste. I just see something in the chat here. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Merle. Thank you.
I kind of get the feeling from these last couple of commentaries that even if you return, your sanctuary is yours, not mine, all of that. I feel like if you return, you think it's going to be fine, but it's not.
Or it'll be fine, but it's not going to be the same.
Well, yeah, but it's not. That's why I'm saying you think it'll be fine.
Right.
When you get there, are you going to accept what it has become? And are you going to analyze why it became this way?
Look, I think that's so interesting. We're going to get more into contemporary ideas about Israel in a little bit, but I wasn't there. But what did the Chalutzim and the Zionists, think under British mandate, and then in 1948 becoming a state? What did they think in 1967 finally returning to Jerusalem? Right, and it wasn't how it was, once upon a time, and certainly maybe not even how imagined. Right, there's that old saying, right? You can never go home again.
Yeah.
There's maybe truth in that. Okay. A lovely little piece here by Rabbi Lord Sachs of blessed memory. He says the repeated phrases, if after all this, if despite this, if despite everything, right, come like hammer blows of fate. It is a passage shattering in its impact. All the more so since so much of it came true at various times in Jewish history. Yet the curses end with the most profound promise of ultimate consolation. Despite everything, God will not break his covenant with the Jewish people. Collectively, they will be eternal. They may suffer, but they will never be destroyed. They will undergo exile, but eventually they will return. So how does that sit with what we were just talking about? Does it make it hopeful?
Yes, I think brilliantly, and I'm sorry he's not with
Just
us.
a minute.
Hi, Susan.
Yeah, yes, didn't I say it? I said
Yeah, go
it's
ahead. Yeah.
brilliant. It gives hope. I mean, the Hatikva, and I'm sorry that Rabbi Lord is not with us anymore.
Brilliant guy. It is an understatement, right? Nina.
I read something in the Lexicon Mikrai that's what I don't know. The Mikra is like the Bible. That during the Assyrian exile, they took the rich people first. So the people who left wouldn't have the money to form another army.
Mm.
And that was like something that I never thought of. And it was like mind-blowing. So there was a strategy, and the land was divided. Yehuda and Shomron, the two pieces with two different kings. So there was no unity. So I just thought about it now when we came to this, that coming back, it won't be the same and blah, blah, blah. So there is a message there, first of all, unity. And second, thank God that Israel is an army. So there we go.
I mean, yes and yes, right? But that's such an interesting idea that you sort of,
Isn't that something?
yeah, you eliminate the ability to,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
It's fascinating.
Mhm.
I think the distinction as well is the second portion that you read says collectively they will be eternal. So the previous one says it'll be desolate, it'll be waste, you can't return. So I think that presumes that maybe some of the Jewish people may have sinned or may be exiled, but collectively the whole Jewish people, the ones who did not sin or the ones whose land will not be desolate and wasteful, our people will be eternal, and we have that return.
Absolutely. It's a great reading of it. Merle.
God may not break his covenant with the Jewish people, but God will teach you what you did wrong by not following the covenant.
Absolutely. Look, I think
May I ask a question about, because covenant is a promise. And when you pray, you make promises to Hashem, to Adonai. He knows our hearts. So I feel excited about this because I know I'm home. I returned. I just love Hashem and Israel and every one of you.
Thanks, Nora. Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point, Merle, right? That I almost think of it in some ways like a parent who, thankfully my kids are young. I don't have this experience yet, but certainly I talk to folks too often whose kids are in horrible trouble and do horrible things. And, they've, in some cases, severed ties with them, but, there's still love there. It's still their child, right? It changes. So I think that's an interesting point, that just because God doesn't break his covenant doesn't mean that everything's perfect. Doesn't mean that it's going to be like it was, right? But it does mean that God's not abandoning the people. Okay, we'll move a little bit further if there's no other comments here. Okay, somebody want to read this number 6?
Verse 6, I'll read it.
Sure, go for it.
Indeed, we would suggest that dysphoria and not monotheism, I can't say that, may be most important contribution that Judaism has to make to the world. Dysphoria can teach us that it is possible for a people to maintain its distinctive culture, its differences, without controlling land, without controlling other people, or developing a need to dispose of them of their lands.
Thank you so much. Right, I think this is maybe one of the I agree, right? I should say Dana Boyarin, who's a professor at Berkeley of Jewish Studies. The notion that Jews have been able to maintain, Jewish life, Jewish existence, Judaism, much less have it evolved without a homeland for most of modernity, in diaspora is, I think, remarkable
Diaspora.
in a few different ways, right? And I'll offer two, and then I kind of want to know what folks think. One is that in the fact that it's sort of, I think, of note is I've never had the pleasure of meeting the Dalai Lama, but I've heard that he asks every rabbi, maybe every Jew he meets, how it is that the Jewish people have been able to survive and sustain themselves for, 2,000 years at least, without a land of their own, because that's sort of the predicament that he and his people find themselves in, and that what is the secret, as it were, that the Jewish people have that's enabled them to maintain that. And I think there are a lot of different answers to that, and interested to know what people think actually, what has contributed to our ability to not simply wash away and assimilate, as so many other peoples who have lost their lands prior to returning to them.
May I share some insight on
just
that?
a moment, Tona, please.
Yes, dear.
Just a moment. Right. And then the other piece I'll share is that actually, we're going to stop there for a second. So I'm interested in thoughts. What do you think it is that has enabled Jews and Judaism to not just survive, but to thrive in many ways in diaspora? Susan.
I have a question. Who was Daniel and Jonathan Boyarin?
So sorry, I was thinking, I believe Jonathan is Daniel Boyarin's son, I believe, but Daniel Boyarin is a professor of Jewish history at Berkeley.
At Berkeley.
Yes.
Okay.
Contemporaries Live. He's written a bunch of great books. I'm at home. I have some in the office. And by in the office, I mean in a box in storage somewhere.
Okay. So Daniel is his brother?
That could be. We could do a quick Google.
I just wonder who they are, because I think this is a kind of controversial statement. I get it for the day.
So important to say, they're academics.
What?
They're academics. They're not rabbis.
They're academics.
Yes.
Okay. So often academics have to come up with some, because I know I was there, something that's a little different so they get attention and they can write on it. But I think that they can't discount one for the other. I think
agreed.
I don't think they're binary oppositions. I think
no, certainly not.
I think monotheism did enable them to survive. And what's the distinctive culture? I mean, there's Sephardic and there's Ashkenazim, and he didn't put in to this statement the anti-Semitism that existed in all these, so they don't need a land. I mean, the whole reason in the 20th century, late 19th, that Israel became a concept of returning to Israel was Herschel and others in Russian who witnessed the anti-Semitism. So, and there were distinctive cultures, and they still are in Israel, that are often opposing. But I don't think this is an either-or situation. And it's great that Judaism was able to survive and thrive in the diaspora. But I don't think the discounting of monotheism is appropriate.
I couldn't agree more. I think that one could make a statement about the Jewish people's ability to survive and thrive in diaspora being remarkable and being a contribution to the world without even mentioning monotheism, right? Which is also an incredible contribution to the world. I agree. I think presenting them in a dichotomous way is probably undermines the argument of diaspora, right? So, but I do wonder what do folks potentially attribute survival and growth and evolution in diaspora, without a homeland, to when so many others haven't.
Well, the Torah is one, and that's usually the answer that the Dalai Lama gives. I mean, I'm a guess that it's people of the book, and the Torah and the Talmud have kept us vibrant together. Those who read it, yes.
Yeah, shared text, shared study, certainly. Other ideas?
I think there's another answer to that. A couple of answers. First of all, I don't think that we should read this as they're saying that diaspora, not monotheism, are important. I think the statement is that the diaspora had more importance than monotheism. And
certainly in modernity, that's for sure.
And I think the other distinction that probably needs to be made is between Jewish culture and Jewish religion. So the question is, how many other civilizations had both a distinctive religion and a distinctive culture that was asked to thrive in a diaspora? And in that way, I think we're somewhat unique, although not entirely unique. And I think that the difference between Jewish culture and Jewish religion allows us to thrive because Jews get to make choices about how they want to associate with what they think of as Judaism.
Absolutely, right. And you make the point, a great point, that it is both Jewish observance from a religious standpoint, as well as Jewish cultural ethos, that has survived and thrived. I was in New York this past weekend officiating a wedding, and of course, I had to stop at Zabar's, which is not a synagogue, and I was there on Shabbat, but it is many people's synagogue, shall we say. David.
Well, the importance of this, I think, is it's saying we can go all around the world and keep our culture, but we don't have to plunder, rape, control, colonialism. So isn't that what this is saying? Diaspora teaches us that we can do these things without doing what other civilizations, the Romans, the Greeks, the Ottomans, and all that stuff. They conquered and tried to impose their culture on the conquered people, but we don't.
You're right. No conquering and no, certainly no forced conversions and no imposition of Jewish culture and others. That's a great point. Merle?
I think the fact that we can't all pick up and move to Israel. It would be lovely if we can. We help people travel and see it as much as they can. And I think that we have created communities wherever we live that hopefully keep those who choose to practice their religion, to keep them practicing their religion. And that when we travel to different places within our own country or foreign countries, it doesn't matter where we are. Arnie's the one that looks up in every telephone book, wherever we are in the world, where the nearest synagogue is. I think that those things provide us with the culture and gives us the ability to practice our religion no matter where we are. Yeah, it would be nice if the whole world was Israel, but it isn't. And we have to, creative is the wrong word, but we have to figure out ways to practice it if we choose to, wherever we are.
Absolutely. Risa.
I just want to say that it's also important that wherever we are in the diaspora, we are instructed to respect the law of the land and not to change our sense of law and our traditions, but to respect that law and to live under that law. But I think the hardest thing for me in this whole statement is not monotheism, but the most important contribution that Judaism has to make to the world. I disagree with that so wholeheartedly that the whole thing is nonsense to me because it just doesn't make sense to me.
I think we could qualify it and say, an important contribution that Judaism has made to the world is diaspora. I think Yeah, we could argue all day as to what the most important contribution is. I agree. It's a little hyperbolic. I also think I'll say something that is maybe a bit controversial. Susan sort of alluded to this, I think, in her comment. I don't think this is controversial, but I actually don't think that we can dismiss the role, ironically, that anti-Semitism has played in Jews, in essence, remaining Jewish despite being in diaspora, right? And that, of course, as many of you have heard me speak about ad nauseum, is the unique, position that Jews ultimately found themselves in America. But prior to Jews coming to the United States in 1754, I believe, right? Jews were never actually citizens of any of the places they lived in diaspora, right? Not in the same way that, a French citizen was or what have you. They were Jews. And even if they wished to assimilate, even if they only cared about the culture or not about the culture at all and wanted to, even in Germany, right? Fully adopt the norms and customs of wherever they happen to live in diaspora and completely let go of Judaism. It didn't matter because you have a governing authority that's saying, that's lovely, but you're Jewish. Right? You're a member of, you're them, not us. Right? And Jews ultimately come to the United States, and that's no longer the case, which creates challenges certainly for Jewish identity and affiliation to continue through this day. But I would argue also, lays the groundwork and creates the opportunity, which has come true, for Jews, to experience success and in the United States, unlike any other place and period in all of Jewish history.
Rabbi?
Yes, Mary. Yes.
Yes, my hand has been up a long time.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what everyone is saying, in that the 5 Supreme Court injustices not only will ruin women's lives, young women, older women, women of all ages, totally disrespect them as human beings, but they are anti-freedom of religion. No matter how many faults the United States has, and we're seeing some of them as happened last week, it is a country where everybody can worship any way that they wish to, and nobody is telling them that they cannot worship as they please. Therefore, a Jewish woman can go to these 5 injustices and say to them, you are anti my religion. My religion tells me that the woman's life is more important than the fetus's life. They're not a baby until they're born, according to Judaism and according to many doctors, Jewish and non-Jewish. Therefore, you cannot tell me that I must go according and I must do what your religion tells you to do. Because my religion says that we are also, we may, not that we must, but we may terminate with the doctor's consent and the rabbi's consent a pregnancy of a 14-year-old young woman that was raped.
So,
That
Miriam,
we may, in order to save her life and the unwanted child that she will give.
Miriam, I know that it is certainly an issue that is timely and of the day and on a lot of folks' minds. And we're going to try to keep politics out of Torah for today.
I don't consider this politics.
It
goes right along with what we were saying.
I understand. I do think one of the interesting things that I'm going to take from what you shared, that I'm not going to go deep on, but just a little something to sit in the back of your head, and maybe this is dancing on the head of a pin. I think there's a distinction to be made between freedom of religion and freedom from religion. And I think that, I think that what we hope to have is both. But I
Here.
Okay, we're going to push a little bit further here. A little piece of Talmud. Anybody want to read this from the Babylonian Talmud?
I will.
You read, don't worry about it. I'll take it.
Okay, dear.
Okay,
Okay, why was the first temple destroyed? The rabbis asked. Because of three evils in it: idolatry, sexual immorality, and bloodshed. But why was the second temple destroyed? Seeing that during the time it stood, people occupied themselves with Torah, with observance of precepts, and with the practice of charity. Because during the time it stood, hatred without rightful cause prevailed. This is to teach you that hatred without rightful cause is deemed as grave as all the three sins of idolatry, sexual immorality, and bloodshed together.
Amen.
Right? Everybody agree?
Yes.
No? I don't.
I disagree.
Tell me.
I don't think there should be a qualifier that
Yeah.
Hatred shouldn't be acceptable at all.
Amen.
Agreed.
I think that's a good point, because if you hate the evil people, you can hate the Nazis, and that's correct. I mean, that I would say is correct behavior.
Yeah,
Well,
I hate
but
Nazis.
doesn't Pirkei Avot in essence say that you should not hate, that you should seek to change the behavior of that person, not hate that person?
Yes. It's in the Talmud. But it does say hatred without rightful cause. But I think what they're referring to is Jews coming out against one another. And they said that's the kind of saying that the Second Temple fell because there was hatred within the Jewish community, and there were sects that were arguing with one another. So
Sinat chinam is hatred without cause, but hatred does have its place if we want to talk about Nazism.
yeah, good. Thank you.
May I?
Okay, we'll go a little bit further here. One more here as we kind of one last text that hopefully will provoke a little more conversation, and then we'll wrap up here. So one more by our friend Rabbi Lord Sachs. Israel may suffer, but it will never die. And this Israel, the people, not necessarily the place. It may experience exile, but one day it will return. It may undergo the most terrible persecution, but it will never have reason to despair. The placement of this prophecy at the culmination of the curses is one of the most fateful of all biblical assertions. No fate is so bleak as to murder hope itself. No defeat is final, no exile endless, no tragedy the last word of the story. Thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah.
I wanted to share with you, 1 second, Rabbi. There was a man the other day that was very anti-Semitic, and I brought food to the kids that were homeless. And when I started giving them food, he said, I just hate the Jews. I go, well, I'm Jewish, and Jesus is Jewish. But I brought food to the kids, and he said, you know what? You're a dog. You look like Audrey Hepburn. And I said, Jesus is Jewish. He loves you, and God loves you. Yeshua loves you, and there's no place for hatred. And he totally changed his whole tune because of feeding the kids.
Beautiful. Look, I think I think we can take from that last piece by Rabbi Lord Sachs. There's always hope. I would argue that's why Hatifa is the anthem of the state of Israel, right? That's why after all those years, still hope is still ultimately a return. Yeah?
Keeps me going.
Anybody have a final opinion? I was waiting for you. You're muted.
Muted.
Okay. All right. The sentence "Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah" has so much weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that what you see Israel doing now, and what they what they teach the world, even if it's just survival, and rebuild and reconstruct. I think it's some of the sentences in the Torah are like so true, and it's like so fit today. And every day in the last 70 some years since we had the state, when I read in a list of most richest countries, and I saw Israel in a list, I couldn't believe it. One of the richest country. And we know that it wasn't from thievery, and it wasn't from the will to be a power.
And it wasn't from oil.
Which those are the two things that they failed to mention when they said reasons for not doing what we're doing. What did the Nazi do? Empty the Louvre and stole all the pictures and tell me that it was because of the hate of the Jews? I think it's the hate of not being a power, and a crazy man, leading the whole thing. But as long as there was money and something to win for them, or like the hair that they took from people or the teeth, it's just a plain, I can't even say thievery, in the worst way that you can think of. And people never say it. They think it's the hate of the Jews. They hated the whole world because everybody was involved. They went into France, and France went along with them, even though they emptied the Louvre. They went into Poland, they went in whatever they want. And the other countries, just because they thought that they're going to be saved, they let them do this, whatever it is. And it was always money. They went into Argentina with billions of gold to get shelter, money. It's always this. And people are ashamed sometimes to actually say it.
It's funny, okay? Penina, I did the two just interesting kind of humorous things that come to mind, or among many others, in what you were sharing. One, as I alluded to, right, the old Golda Meir joke, right, that I think it was Golda Meir, right, that wandering in the desert for 40 years to bring us to the only place in the Middle East without oil. Right. And the other being just when you talk about, all the contributions of Israel to the world, and obviously we think of tech today and all these other things.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I remember like it was yesterday, being in, Sunday school in, I think it was fourth grade, because Israel was and still is the curriculum in fourth grade. And learning about the fact that, most irrigation systems, including the one in my house in Santa Barbara, came from Israel, right? That Israel invented, certainly modern irrigation, and thinking that was so, amazing.
Unbelievable.
And it is remarkable, the contribution of such a small, forget geography.
Absolutely.
Small group of people.
They're growing tomatoes in the desert. They're putting plastic over it so the sweat will fall back into the plants so they wouldn't need so much water. Yep. It's like things that they did. It's a genius.
And they're
teaching other nations to do it.
Absolutely. Risa or Stan. I don't know, whoever has their hand up. Stan, you're muted. Stan, if only I could mute you in real life. I kid.
I've been muted, but I'm not deaf, Rabbi.
Please,
yes.
Please.
I read the quote, which is before us, and my reaction is intensely negative.
Please.
I think that that's probably one of the most dangerous things for Jews to believe. And it really makes great sermonics, and we all applaud. First of all, the group here, yeah, right. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the eternality of the Jewish people cannot be denied. Terrific. But if we acted as if we believed that, we would lose control of our destiny. And I don't think that Jews made it through waiting for God to fix things, because God fixed nothing. And survival is when the Jewish people realizes that if it wants to survive, it better educate itself, it better educate its children, it better strengthen its social justice initiative, et cetera, et cetera. If we honestly believe that no matter what happens, we will survive, we will die. And I look at it, and God, I've heard Rabbi Sachs preach and speak in public. He is a phenomenal preacher, but boy, do I disagree with the premise.
It's a great point because it lets us off the hook. in a
Yeah.
way, right? Don't worry, it'll all be fine, right? We'd probably much rather say Im Tirtzu and Zoagada, right? That if we make it happen, then what Lord Sachs suggests will happen, but that it's on us and not on God. And that's maybe a thought that I'll conclude with today, right? Which is this notion that I think God has no hands but ours in the world, right? We're the ones that make God's presence manifest in the world through our actions and our behavior and what we do and how we behave and how we treat one another.
I think both are true. I think with Rabbi Davids is correct. We have to make it happen, but they aren't mutually exclusive. And you think of positive psychology with a sense of hope, and Viktor Frankl, who really embodies both of them, that we have to have hope and we have to do something, think that life has meaning. And how does life have meaning is by contributing to the good. So I think, again, they're not mutually exclusive, but they're complementary, that we have to take it upon ourselves. I definitely agree to try and educate the next generation of Jews and to reach out and do and work to improve the world. But we also have to have a sense of hope that something can be accomplished and we will prevail, we can prevail. I mean, psychologists will tell you, and that's how we get through the pandemic when it was happening, to think that, okay, what could be worse? Well, we could adjust this and think of like what might happen at the end of it. So I think they're complementary rather than mutually exclusive.
Beautiful.
If I could just toss in, Viktor Frankl's great strength was his decision that a person or a group that has a purpose in life, no matter what that purpose is, has a better chance of surviving than someone who doesn't. So I don't think Viktor Frankl belongs, in this conversation. One would say that having hope makes it easier to keep on fighting. But the absolute belief that no matter what, the Jewish people will survive, I think is toxic.
Well, I think interestingly, Stan, this is just occurring to me that I would say, not necessarily just even toxic, but stands in direct opposition to this Torah portion, right? Which is saying that there are consequences to actions, and it's not, no matter what, it's all going to be fine, and what you do doesn't matter, right? Because I think the notion of what we do doesn't matter, it's all going to be fine in the end, is not particularly Jewish. But I agree with Susan. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it'll all be okay. It'll all be okay in the end. So get to work, or if we get to work. Right. I think it's hope. Let's have that hope that if we will it, if we fight for it, if we do it, it'll happen.
It's a motivation.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And it's if and then. That's what this whole thing is about. If you follow my laws,
right?
And if you don't, then there are, and that's the life.
Yes. Right. I had a conversation with young ladies. We're coming bat mitzvah tomorrow morning. We'll be at the resident campus. And when we first started working on a Devar Torah, she said, Rabbi, I don't get this. This is just not true, right? And you could read my Shabbat message later today. That's kind of how I begin. We know this isn't true. And I said, well, maybe not necessarily in exactly the way this stipulates, but you really think there aren't consequences to your actions in life and to the decisions you make? Mm-hmm. So, Merle, I'll give you the last word.
I think that survival, hope, all of these adjectives to keep us going in life and in Judaism requires one big thing. And it's us, it's the people we're with, it's everybody that surround us, is we have to compromise.
Mhm.
Can't do it all ourselves, and they can't do it all themselves. But sometimes if we're a community, we all work together to make it work.
Mhm. Beautiful.
May I
Okay,
show you my pillow that says hope?
Good.
My
That's
pillow says
beautiful,
hope.
Donna. Miriam, go ahead. I think you're muted.
Where'd she go?
Uh, Susan Ehrlich said something just in passing. It was a word. And for me, it resonated so much that I just want to remark upon it and emphasize it. She used the word contribute and the word contribution. That word is ever more operative to me personally as I get on in years, and I'm fortunate to have lived many decades. And therefore, I would want to pass this word on. For example, I make talks to my Hadassah women, and in my next speech to them, I will use the word contribution in every sense of what it could possibly mean. It means everything. It means you're identifying. It means you're part of. It means you are belonging. It means you are not isolated. It means that you are fortunate to have a blueprint which is written in Pirkei Avot, a blueprint which is written throughout the Tanakh and every book of the 5 books of Moses, plus Shayahu, etc., to tell you what you can do as an individual of your very vital group that you want to see live on forever for more millennia to come. And therefore, I believe the word contribution, which you may think about from the moment you are fortunate enough to get out of bed and be vertical and be motivated by gratitude. I think it's terribly important that we incorporate this word into our very being.
Beautiful, beautiful, a beautiful thought to take with us into this beautiful Shabbat. So thank you, everybody, for making a little time, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a
Shabbat shalom,
wonderful
everyone.
evening.
Have a wonderful
Miss you.
weekend.
Miss you. Love you. Kiss that baby, Rabbi, for me. Thank you, Merle, for what you had to say. You were so profound. And you have the most beautiful eyes.
Thank you. Yeah, the black eye is
And
finally gone, and the new glasses come next week.
Oh, and Miriam, thank you so much. You also have beautiful eyes.
Video. Okay. Oh,
Very beautiful. I just wish we could all have dinner together and I could pay for it.
good to leave it, 'cause I'm-
Okay.
Leave me.
One day, play piano and do some fundraising for the sisterhood. Thank you, Miriam, Merle. Shabbat shalom. Bye, Risa. Bye, Rabbi Davis.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome. I'm going to go play the piano now and be quiet. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything is light and gay. Bye. I'll always think of you that way.